But at the same time, I can't remember somebody who was a more vocal appreciator of Puka going into the draft last year than you. So I thought you were a perfect person to sort of help us look back before we look forward. What was it about Puka's prospect evaluation that what can we learn from that? And what was it that really made him stand out as a player to you?
Oh, Harmon, I loved him as a prospect. I mean, I know, like you said, a lot of sharp people in the industry, including yourself, JJ, everybody else in the space, liked him as a player too. But like the things that jumped out for Puka for me, it wasn't just the film, which was fantastic. I mean, you saw as soon as you turned on the film, the body control, the route running, the ability to not only beat zone, but and press coverage and man coverage. But it was also the analytics that backed up all of that. So I try to marry and come from both sides of the aisle when I'm looking at prospects and players and projecting them to the NFL. And so I know with RP, you usually, what is it, like a sample of 5 to 7 games, Harmon? I don't want to speak out of turn for you.
Yeah, usually it's 8 games. For Puka,
Yep.
He was one of these ones I had to do a mini sample on because there wasn't, number one, there was a lot of injuries, which of course is a big deal when we're talking about his prospect profile, but just there wasn't that much film that I had on him last year. So I think I only did 3 on him.
Yeah, and so same thing. Like I go back and I try to marry the analytics to also the film. So if I can find the all 22 for guys, I mean, I'm watching minimum 5 games, usually 7 to 8 if I can find the all 22, which is like striking gold. I mean, you know this struggle.
Yeah.
And trying to find that, but he popped both film and analytics. I mean, this is a player that the injuries, and I think the other part about all this is that the outside metrics or the peripherals on it, like not going to an SEC, like a big helmet college, so he's going to get the puff and praise of the SEC and other places like that, but also the injuries, transferring, and I think a lot of that, and the testing, because it's not like he tested just insane, so can build the hype for him during the pre-draft process, but it was the film as well as the analytics, because over his final 2 seasons, we're talking about a wide receiver that was entering the NFL draft over his final 2 years, 2nd and 6th in yards per route run overall. In his final season, he was also top 23 amongst all FBS wide receivers, at least 15 targets versus man and zone coverage in yards per route run against those 2 particular coverages. So it was like, I love the film. I loved the analytical profile for him. And really, there were just so many other things that I don't want to say are noise, but I mean, and I'll throw this back to you, Harmon. Like if there's any position, looking at the skill guys for running back, tight end, wide receiver, that we're willing, or we should be willing to say, look, you don't have to be an athletic freak to be awesome at this. Do we not see that with the wide receiver, like over years after year after year, where it's like, you just need to hit the benchmarks of testing. You don't have to run a 4.2 or 4.3 to get open at will and to be freaking awesome as a wide receiver. So, I mean, do you agree with that? Like, I think there's more nuance and context that comes with playing the wide receiver position that, you know, all the measurables can't always grasp.
Yeah, I think Zach Whitman years ago used to do, I don't know if he still does this, but I don't think he does, but 3 Sigma athlete basically was like, you know, the using the Spark score that like the Seahawks used to sort of identify, again, the most athletic prospects, the whole thing. I remember Rashard Higgins, you know, years ago was a player that I really liked on film. And but at the same time, he had some of the worst like athletic testing possible at the receiver position. Like that is a red flag when you're like a non-NFL caliber athlete. And honestly, Higgins ended up making a decent career for himself, like played for a couple of teams, had a couple of moments, which for a non-NFL caliber athlete actually ended up being a pretty nice little moment for him. But again, if you're there, that's concerning. But if you're just in this large swath, like the middle range of players, that's fine. Like you said, hitting certain benchmarks and really like athleticism at the combine can end up being something that leads us astray at the receiver position. So I would totally agree with you that like athleticism is not one of the first boxes you need to check at this position. Especially, I should say, the way we measure it from like a combine sense. You know, the in-game GPS stuff, like a lot of that is what the Rams were drawn to with both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So that's a whole different set of discussions.
Yeah, I don't disagree with all of that. And anybody can go watch all the pre-draft clips with the Rams talking about, you know, comparing him to previous players that got drafted, where it's like, don't ask him to go run a 40, but in-game wise, his miles per hour, and he's checking a ton of boxes. So yeah, that's a total different rabbit hole. But like, just the correlation to high-end athleticism, like you don't need that. Just check the boxes. I don't care if you run a 4.4 versus like a 4.5. I care if you run like a 4.8 and stuff like that. So again, going back to it, there's more context with getting open and being a good wide receiver than just what you can do in gym shorts with a stopwatch.
100%. So I went back and was just looking at the write-up that I had on him at Reception Perception last year. You know, you look at just a lot of the like the results, the things that I track. 74% success rate versus man, really, really good. Just under 79% success rate versus zone. That's pretty solid for a 3-game sample. 73% success rate versus press, which was the one number that like made me push him up my ranks. I think I had him like receiver 12 last year. Didn't drop a lot of passes when I watched him. Was pretty decent in the open field, like able to break some tackles out there. So checking a lot of boxes, but again, what I wrote was, in the summary of it, overall, Nacua is a rugged player who is reliable when on the field and projects as a solid route runner, especially in the short game. I can see him sticking on an NFL roster and ultimately cracking into a rotation. He has some upside as a guy that's probably going to go on day 3 to eventually earn targets and become a trusted outlet receiver. So yeah, I liked him, but like, again, this is the tough part about saying like I like Puka Nacua, because I liked him, you liked him, a lot of these people liked him. Nobody saw like a historic NFL campaign coming. So